Hey guys, what's up? Icy Soul for Icy Duelist here, bringing you another episode of my beginner's guide to Yu-Gi-Oh! This episode we're talking about the brand new Arc V mechanic which just got implemented this year, 2014, into Yu-Gi-Oh! Now this is, as far as game mechanics go and how to actually play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! This video pretty much has everything else you're going to need, and by the end of this video you will know how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! You'll know all the game mechanics, everything. If you've watched all the previous videos of this playlist, you'll know, after this video, you'll know it all, because this is the final piece of information about the actual game mechanics of Yu-Gi-Oh!, how the game actually works. But don't think your training is done. Definitely not. Although after this video, you will know how to play the game, the next few videos in this playlist, the next few final videos of the playlist, will actually show you how to actually be good at Yu-Gi-Oh! How to actually go from a total noob, a total novice, to a decent player. I don't think I'm gonna have the skills to be able to teach you how to top events, but you'll be like a fairly skilled Yu-Gi-Oh! Player by the end of this entire series. But as far as like learning the actual game, this is it. So jumping into these new Arc V mechanics, Arc V has released a few new rule changes that are all kind of referred to collectively by Konami as Master Rule 3. So let's take a look at Master Rule 3 and all the new changes that have been implemented into Yu-Gi-Oh! So starting out, we have the new Turn 1 rulings. Now, it used to be in the old game from 1996 to 2014, both players started the game by drawing 5 cards, then whoever went first drew 1 card from their deck during the draw phase of their first turn. The new mechanic states, as of March 2014, the rules now state that after both players have drawn their 5 cards at the start of the duel, the player who goes first must skip his or her draw phase on the first turn of the duel. The player that goes second may conduct their draw phase on turn 2. So this kind of poses like a new question. Do you want to be able to build the defense, or do you want to have a card advantage? And that's kind of like the reason why they implemented this this new Turn 1 ruling. So moving on to the much-awaited Field Spell ruling. I know that I was telling you guys, oh guys, there's going to be new Field Spell mechanics in Arc V, so I kept dragging out what Field Spells were for so long, over so many videos, and but this is what I'm gonna finally tell you guys, the new Field Spell ruling. So, as you know what Field Spells are, thanks to the Spells and Traps video. That was the last video, and the old game mechanic for Field Spells stated that only one Field Spell was allowed to be on the field at a time. If the opposing player played a Field Spell while one was already activated, the one previously on the field would have been destroyed and sent to the graveyard. However, with the new Field Spell rulings, as of March 2014, it now states that both players can have one Field Spell on the field at the same time. So if your opponent activates a Field Spell while one is already in play, their effect is also added to the entire field. So the effect of your Field Spell and their Field Spell works simultaneously across the entire field. So basically, yeah, it's a second field effect, basically. Instead of just the one that applies to the player who activated it and their opponent, and when the opponent plays one, theirs is destroyed. Now both players can have their own Field Spell at the same time, but it still affects the entire field. So their Field Spell affects me while my Field Spell affects them, and of course each Field Spell affects the person who activated it as well. So those are the new Field Spell rulings, so congratulations, you finally know everything about Field Spells. Next we have the new updated damage steps. So as of March 2014, the damage steps which occur during the battle phase have been updated. There are now 5 damage steps. This kind of allows the new Arc V cards to have more specific timings on when effects activate during the battle phase, and let's go into these. These are rep directly from the Konami explanation of, the Arc V mechanics. So, Start 1 is one of the new, these are the new updated damage steps. Step 1 is the start of the damage step. Conditions that affect damage calculations, such as negations and changes to a monster's attack and defense, are taken into account here. So face-down monsters are not required to be flipped face-up at this point. This is pretty much immediately after you declare your attack that the start of the damage step occurs. Then step 2 is pre-damage calculation. Affected face-down cards are placed in face-up position at this step unless flipped. Effects that take place during the damage step are invoked in this step. This is typically the last step when changes to a monster's attack and defense take place. So, for example, like my Injection Fairy Lily, who you pay 2,000 life points to increase her attack by 3,000. Since that takes place, since that changes the monster's attack and defense, it would more than likely take place in the pre-damage calculation step, because it's before you actually compare the monster's attack and defense and get into an actual battle. It's after after the battle has been declared, but you haven't actually committed to the battle yet. So step 3 is damage calculation. This was covered in the 5Ds tutorial. You compare the monster's attack and defense, find out which one is higher. This was already covered. Then the post-damage calculation, step 4. Effect timings that say, quote, when taking damage, or and quote, during battle, are activated in this step. I believe both of these I think both of these effect timings are fairly new to the game. They may be. I haven't seen really any older cards that really talk about it, so I'm pretty sure this is kind of new. And it says any flipped up cards' effects are also activated during this step. So those are the new updated damage steps. And at the end of the damage step, all damage calculations are applied, and destroyed monsters are sent to the graveyard in this step, which also say any, quote, when destroyed effects will be activated. So if the monster effect says when destroyed, that's when their effect would activate. So those are the updated damage steps of the new Arc V mechanics. Now, I don't know if this actually applies to this next one applies to the TCG. I haven't actually seen it yet in the TCG. It may, but as far as I can see, it's only in the OCG. But if it does come to the TCG, then it'll be helpful. Now, this isn't really integral to the gameplay. It's just one of the new things that they actually brought out, and that's new, easy-to-read effects. So cards that have multiple effects will now be labeled with a number inside a circle within the card text to more easily distinguish which effect you are referring to when playing. Now, I got a little picture from a magazine that covers the new Arc V mechanics from the OCG, and as you see here, this is what I'm talking about. This little 1 in the circle and a little 2 in the circle. That basically distinguishes between the two different effects of the card. So you could say to your opponent, when you're activating the effect of whatever the hell this card is, you could say, I activate effect 1, or I activate effect 2. So that way your opponent kind of knows already ahead of time what you're talking about, and they can easily look it up and don't have to scroll through the entire card text to try to find it. So it's helpful to when you're actually activating effects, and it makes it a little bit more easier to negotiate and declare effects to your opponent. That's all that really does. But of course, the biggest implementation to the game is a new 7th monster kind. Now, so as of March 2014, in addition to normal, effect, fusion, ritual, synchro, and exceed monsters, a brand new 7th kind of monster was introduced into the game, and that is Pendulum Monsters. Now, these are the 2 of the 3 most popular Pendulum Monsters right now. Of course, Pendulum Monsters really aren't that popular, but as of now, it's still kind of too new, and just like it was with Synchro and Exceed when those came out, it wasn't really that popular among duelists, but I think give it time and pendulums will gain some footing. But as of right now, these are like 2 of the 3 most popular Pendulum Monsters of players that actually play them. The third being Odd Eye's Pendulum Dragon, which isn't pictured here. But going into a little bit what's new on these Pendulum Monster cards. Notice that the set information and the circulation are now down in the bottom left corner of the card instead of up kind of in the middle of the card. So this is because they just have so much going on in the middle of the card here, all this new, that they had to actually move the circulation and set information down here. They're still legitimate Yu-Gi-Oh cards, guys, but you know, they just had so much going on the card, they had to kind of move that little bit of information down to the bottom of the card. So so that's where the new circulation and set information are on Pendulum Monsters. Now you notice the left pendulum scale and the right pendulum scale, otherwise known as the blue pendulum scale and the red pendulum scale. These are you take these into account when pendulum summoning, which we're going to talk about in a bit. And the numbers under these also refer to pendulum summoning. They refer to levels, but we'll get into that in a minute, so don't worry too much about that. And the pendulum effect is right here. We'll get into what that is right now, I guess. So, Pendulum Monsters, look in a little bit more detail. As you notice, before we get into that, you notice how the card fades from orange into green. And why do you think that is? Well, Pendulum Monsters work both as monsters and spell cards. Which kind of makes sense why they kind of fade from one border into the other border. So, they work like effect monsters or normal monsters if the top half of the card is yellow bordered instead of orange bordered, because I have seen some Pendulum Monsters that also, their monster components are normal monsters instead of effect monsters. I've seen some of those, but they aren't really that popular as of right now. But for the most part, you'll see effect Pendulum Monsters. So, they work like effect monsters if you summon them in your monster card zone. Now, just like any other effect monster, you use the card text in the card, the bottom, of course, the bottom text in Pendulum Monsters case, right under the type of the monster, as usual, where the effect text would be for any other effect monster. You kind of just go by that card text for the monster effect, and they work like just any other effect monster you've ever played. So, you can play them as just regular monsters, regular effect monsters if you want. But they also work like spell cards if you activate them in your pendulum zones. And the pendulum zone effects are listed in the secondary text box above the type, which you saw in the little diagram of the card, between the 2 pendulum scales. So, when Pendulum Monsters are used as spell cards, they do not go in your spell and trap card zones, but instead into one of the 2 pendulum zones on the new 2014 field. So, the Pendulum Monsters never go in spell and trap card zones, ever. They can only go in the pendulum zones if you're using them as spell cards. So, Pendulum Monsters in your pendulum zones must be activated face up and cannot be set face down in your pendulum zones. They do not go to the graveyard either after activation, and instead remain face up on the field until destroyed. So, Pendulum Monsters can also never be flipped face down in the pendulum zones. So, basically, if you see a Pendulum Monster face down and it's not in the monster card zone, there's a problem. So, that's some consideration. And also, when a Pendulum Monster is destroyed in either the monster card zone or the pendulum zone, they go face up in your extra deck instead of going to the graveyard. The only time a Pendulum Monster can go to the graveyard is when it is detached as Xyz material. Just like any other monster that goes to the graveyard when it's detached as Xyz material. So, and of course, the biggest thing with Pendulum Monsters is they're used to perform a Pendulum Summon. So let's talk about if you're confused about the face-up and the extra deck thing, we're going to go into that. It has to do with Pendulum Summoning, so let's get into Pendulum Summoning right now. So here is our game board, right? Our field. And here, down here is our hand. We have Elemental Hero Clayman, Dark Magician Girl, and Dark Resonator in our hand, along with our 2 Pendulum Monsters. Like I said, you could play these Pendulum Monsters as just regular old effect monsters that have nothing special about them, and you could put them in your monster card zone and just play them like you would any other monster. You could, but for the sake of this, we're going to be putting them in our Pendulum zones to show you how to Pendulum Summon. Now, you'll notice, I'm going to go back to this, to the diagram here. You notice how they have the blue gem and the red gem is the left and right scale. This corresponds with the game board. You'll see the blue gem on the left, red gem on the right. Now, as of right now, all Pendulum Monsters have the same scale for both the left and right Pendulum zones. I imagine that's going to change in the future, but as of right now, as you'll see with Stargazer Magician, he has 1 on either side. So that means you can put him in either Pendulum zone, and his scale is going to be the same, no matter what Pendulum zone you place him in. But the same goes for Time Gazer Magician. His scale is 8. So no matter what zone you put him in, his scale is going to be 8. So we want a Pendulum Summon. So how do we do that? Well, first off, you gotta have, the Pendulum Monsters in your hand. And both of them, and you actually have to either, have them both in your hand or one already in the field, or, you have to basically have them at your disposal. You can't just, grab them from somewhere else off the game board or something, it doesn't work like that. So first, you would activate one of your Pendulum Monsters in one of your Pendulum zones. For this case, I put Time Gazer Magician in the left Pendulum zone. Now, in terms of with Time Gazer and Stargazer Magician, like I said before, which zone you put them in doesn't really matter at this point because they have the same scale on both sides. But in the future, I imagine that will come into play. It will be actually the scale will change depending on which Pendulum zone you put it in. But as of right now, you don't have to worry about that. Time Gazer Magician has a Pendulum scale of 8. In the blue Pendulum zone, the left Pendulum zone over here. So, since this is technically activating a spell card, your opponent does have an opportunity to respond with a quick play spell or a trap if they have one. So, basically, whenever you activate a Pendulum Monster in your Pendulum zone, it is considered activating a spell card. So, your opponent can respond to it the same way as if you activated a spell card in your spell and trap card zone. Moving on, so say they don't have a response, to Time Gazer Magician being activated. Next, we go ahead and activate our Stargazer Magician from our hand in the other Pendulum zone, in the right Pendulum zone. So now, everything is all set for us to Pendulum Summon. And so all you need is just 2 Pendulum Monsters in your Pendulum zones. That is it. To Pendulum Summon. A Pendulum Summon is a type of special summon. However, it is a special summon that you can only do once per turn. This is kind of unique. Most special summons you can do, multiple times in a turn if you have the resources. Pendulum Summoning is unique in the fact that it can only happen once per turn. And I'm pretty sure, as far as I know, it can only happen once per turn. Because it is kind of a really overpowered kind of summoning mechanic. Basically, to Pendulum Summon, you have your 2 Pendulum Monsters in your Pendulum Zone, and you say, I Pendulum Summon. And this is where the numbers under the gems come into play. Since Stargazer Magician has a Pendulum scale of 1, and Time Gazer Magician has a Pendulum scale of 8, that means we can special summon any number of cards, of monsters from our hand whose levels are anywhere in between 2 and 7. So, would you look at that? Every single one of our monsters in our hand is between levels 2 and 7. So you know what? Let's just special summon them all on the board. Just like that. You can special summon, of course, in attack or defense position, because you can choose the battle position for each card as you special summon it. But it is considered as one summon. It's not like I special summon Clayman, then I special summon Dark Magician Girl, then I special summon Dark Resonator. It's all considered one special summon, which of course can be responded to, but your opponent can't respond like per monster. Basically, your monsters just all go up at once, and this opens up so many plays. Like you can Exceed summon if you have monsters at the same level. You can synchro summon if you've pendulum summoned out a tuner and a couple of non-tuners or whatever, and you can make like a synchro monster. You can fusion summon if you have like fusion gate on board, or or polymerization in your hand or something, and you can ritual summon even. I mean, pretty much every other kind of special summoning is available to you now. Except by effect, but pretty much all the other standard ways of summoning that are considered special summons, Pendulum Summoning opens them up because you can swarm the field with monsters and get crazy kind of plays off. So why more people aren't using this, I don't know. But so just to go over something else, let's say let's ignore that we had monsters here and just get rid of them. But let's say that one of our pendulum monsters was destroyed while it was in the pendulum zone. Maybe they mystical space typhooned it or something, and they targeted it and destroyed it. Well, as I said before, pendulum monsters go in face up in the extra deck. Now that is important because say we were able to get another pendulum monster like another Time Gazer Magician in our hand. If we actually activated that Time Gazer Magician in our now free pendulum zone, we can pendulum summon again. But you're like, well, what can you pendulum summon? You have nothing in your hand. You can pendulum summon any pendulum monster that was destroyed and put face up in your extra deck as well, as long as the level still fits within the pendulum scale. So since Time Gazer Magician is a level 3, and does fit between 2 and 7. We can special summon Time Gazer Magician onto the field from our extra deck. So those are like the two ways you can pendulum summon, and you can do any combination of that. Say if you had some cards in your hand and some pendulum monsters, you can take some pendulum monsters from your extra deck and then put some from your hand, and so it's not like you have to do one or the other. But I think that's basically it for pendulum summoning, and that's basically it for how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm pretty sure you guys know now everything there is to know about playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I hope you guys stay tuned for the other videos in this playlist, which it'll show you how you can actually get better at Yu-Gi-Oh! And choose where you want to go with Yu-Gi-Oh! I'll have different options, of what kind of player are you, what do you want to do with Yu-Gi-Oh!, how to be good at what you do with Yu-Gi-Oh!, and go from the fact that now you know the basics, how to play the game. Now it's where do you go from here, and that's what this tutorial is aiming to do from here on out. But congratulations, you now know. If you've watched all the videos in this playlist, you now know how to play the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. So if that's all you needed, then thank you for watching this playlist. But if you want to delve even deeper into becoming a true champion duelist, make sure you stick around for the extra videos in this playlist. It's gonna be pretty sick and enjoyable. So as always, this is Icy Soul for Icy Duelist, signing out.